Hey guys, welcome to the Playpen. Today we are going to be covering part 2 of Warcraft's Lost Legendaries. Today's weapon? The legendary blade of the Scarlet High Lord, the Ashbringer. Now many of you might be saying, but wait, how can the Ashbringer be a lost legendary? The sword is in the game. If you're saying that, then you'd be totally right. The Ashbringer was introduced as a player-obtainable weapon for World of Warcraft 6 expansion as a paladin-only artifact weapon. However, what you might not know is that Ashbringer was originally planned for the first version of World of Warcraft. Let's take a look back. From the onset, Ashbringer has been subject to intense speculation since the release of World of Warcraft. Rumors have been fueled by data mined graphics and item statistics, as well as NPCs alluding to its existence. As we talked about in Part 1, Vanilla WoW, or the original version of World of Warcraft, only ever had 3 permanently obtainable legendary weapons: Thunderfury, Sulfuras, and Atish. However, for a while, rumors persisted that there was indeed another obtainable legendary weapon, one far more powerful and illustrious than the rest. But what could this weapon be? What was it called? How did we obtain it? Was it even in the game? These were all questions almost every player asked. At the launch of World of Warcraft, the only reference to Ashbringer by name was made by an NPC called Caretaker Allen. It was hinted at further with the introduction of the dungeon Dire Maul. Other NPCs such as Alexa Ironknife, Bardu Sharpeye, Narain Soothfancy, and more, as well as random item drops such as Nat Pagel's Guide to Extreme Anglin, all make references to the Ashbringer. Information from these NPCs implied that the Ashbringer was somehow lost, and that certain NPCs knew the location, and were even willing to tell the player after completing a possible set of requirements. However, to this day, they have never shared their knowledge. The mystery surrounding Ashbringer created great interest and discussion among players. Many searched for hidden or unlockable quests that might reward the weapon. Rumors regarding an acquirable Ashbringer persisted until February 26, 2006, when a European community manager by the name of Ionix admitted that it was not in the game. The quote goes, "It's true that currently Ashbringer is not in the game, although one day in the future it will be, but not until after there is an awesome legendary item for casters." The caster legendary item being referred to was Atish, Great Staff of the Guardian, which was added in patch 1.11. You'd think after getting a confirmation like that, the legend of the Ashbringer might finally be put to rest, right? On the contrary, in-game events and even more clues would only push treasure hunters even further. Players encountered the resurrected Scarlet High Lord in the original Naxxramas raid as a Death Knight of the Four Horsemen. He wielded Corrupted Ashbringer, a disfigured and corrupted version of the original blade. The Corrupted Ashbringer could be looted from the Horseman's cache once the 4 NPCs were beaten. Equipping the sword would trigger odd events such as enshrouding the player in darkness, a reputation change among the Scarlet factions, and the deceased High Lord whispering cryptic messages to the player. The strangest thing, however, was the activation of a scripted event within Scarlet Monastery, a low-level 5-player dungeon. Should a player enter the Scarlet Monastery with a Corrupted Ashbringer equipped, a strange scene would be played out. Usual hostile NPCs would treat the player as the High Lord himself and would guide them to the end of the dungeon. As an NPC at the end would inform the player that a son of the deceased High Lord would be able to purify the corrupted blade. However, the son resided in Outland, a zone that would be inaccessible until the release of World of Warcraft's second expansion, the Burning Crusade. From there, most assumed that the Ashbringer was still indeed an obtainable weapon, and that they would just have to wait for the next expansion to get it. Upon release of the Burning Crusade, no mention of the Lost Son was ever made, nor was he ever found. A scene could be viewed in Old Hillsbrad Foothills dungeon in the Caverns of Time that depicted a younger High Lord discussing with his peers the creation of a weapon of untold power. Players quickly realized this was a reference to the Ashbringer. However, this scene would ultimately go nowhere. Players scoured the zones for more clues for years, but to no avail. At this point, most had given up on the legend. Players were tired and figured that it was indeed still just a legend, that the sword was probably no longer worth it. It would be another few years before we would hear of the Ashbringer again. The launch of World of Warcraft's third expansion, Wrath of the Lich King, is imminent. Players are eager to explore and experience the new content. Players who either began as a Death Knight or ventured into the Howling Fjord quickly discovered something incredible. A masked NPC by the name of Tyrion Fordring tasked players with obtaining a relic from within a local dungeon. Once the relic was returned, Tyrion revealed himself to the player and combined the relic with something unseen. What was then created was a purified Ashbringer. Tyrion would ultimately take command of the sword and use it to fight the Scourge. The sword played a major role in Wrath of the Lich King. It acted as a symbol and was used to defeat the Scourge, Frostmourne, and ultimately the Lich King. At this point, it was realized the sword was not going to be obtainable by any one player, as its role in the story was too important. Some players felt cheated, as the sword was no longer a possible obtainable weapon, while others felt vindicated, finally knowing its ultimate fate. The sword would stay in the hands of Tyrion Fordring until it would eventually find its way to Paladin players 8 years later in World of Warcraft Legion. The story of Ashbringer is a fascinating one. No other virtual weapon in World of Warcraft has ever caused such a stir, and none probably ever will again. For years, players hunted vigorously trying to be the first to wield the almighty blade. Most people will ask, what happened? Why did the story of the blade take this turn? It's possible Blizzard did indeed plan to introduce the weapon all the way back in Vanilla WoW. All the related items and NPCs point towards a possible abandoned questline, something similar to the Thunder Fury questline. However, the story writers probably figured out early on that the Ashbringer would play a pretty pivotal role in future expansions and decided to preserve the weapon. Some interesting things to note are that the purified Ashbringer actually has two models: the original, data mined and NPC equipped model, and the retouched artifact version model. The original has lower resolution textures and less detail on the blade itself. The devs would also come out and say that allowing players to loot the corrupted variant from Nexramas was a wrong decision and shouldn't have been allowed. So, that's the story of the original Ashbringer, the legend of a lost sword, hidden away for a time, its true existence unknown. Do you remember the days of hunting for the Ashbringer? Maybe you were one of the players searching for it. Share your stories and any other experiences you may have encountered while looking for the weapon in the comments section below. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our quick look at one of Warcraft's lost legendaries. Catch you on the next one.